Hey folks, welcome back to Mark Kelly Farm on a cool, breezy, misty day. We're going to be out in the garden today, and just because Mother Nature says you're done gardening for the year doesn't mean you actually are. So if you remember, during harvest we were working like 12-hour days, and we really weren't getting out here in the garden every few days like we were, knocking the weeds down and stuff. But as you can see, we really didn't have a lot of weed pressure out here. So the hard work that we did all summer long really paid off. The only area we had more than just a few weeds was this side of the garden over here. We have some lamb's quarter that has sprouted, but it's actually a good thing, and I'll tell you why that's a good thing. So everything that sprouts in the garden from here on out is a withdrawal from our weed seed bank, and none of these weeds have gone to seed. They're all immature weeds. They've just popped up. They're a little too much for bringing the wheel hoe out here, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring out our walk-behind rototiller, and it'll take care of these middles really easy. You can see in the actual row, we don't have a lot of weeds. There's a handful, but because of the mulching that we did on the row, very few weeds actually on the row. And after we get the middles tilled up, I'll bring you back out here so you can see how few weeds are actually left in the row. But we've got all of our tomato plants pulled out. We've got all of our bean plants, pepper plants, and everything pulled out. If you can see, they're out there on the side. And then once those rot a little bit and break down, we'll take the bush hog over there and chew them all up. You can see those squash vines over there. If I was to bush hog that right now, it would wrap up underneath that thing like a bunch of rope, because they're still nice and sturdy. Now some of you will ask, why don't I throw that on the compost pile or just rototill it in? Well, I don't want to rototill it in for the same purpose or the same reason I'm not going to brush hog out there right now, because that'll just wrap up on the rototiller, and the rototiller won't be able to dig anymore because it'll have so much material wrapped up on those tines. Now I don't want to throw them on the compost pile, because even with sitting all year in the compost pile, you go out there next year and you pull that pile apart, those vines most likely will still be intact, and it doesn't make for good compost. Now if I had some type of shredder where I could shred those things, then I could put them on the compost pile, because then they would actually break down. If they didn't break down all the way, at least they'd be in little pieces. So we're going to go get the rototiller. If you can hear it in the background, I already got it running, I got it warming up. We're going to come out here and do these middles and tidy up our garden. Well, hold the phone. One thing I forgot to tell you, when I pulled the tomato vines out, we had a bunch of tomatoes fall on the ground out here. So what I did real quick with the little leaf rake, I came out and pulled all those tomatoes out in the middle of the row. So those will rototill in. If we get a bunch of volunteer tomatoes, I'd rather have them in the middle of the row so they're easy to deal with and not all up under where the row is. Well, it's another day. We got interrupted yesterday. We had to go to town and go to the hardware store and the farm store and the feed store before it closed. So Kelly come out and said, we got to go. So luckily the weather held out. Yesterday, towards the end of the day, the fog rolled in. It got super cold and pretty ugly. So I was happy to quit anyway. But beautiful day out here. It's a little chilly. It's high 30s right now. But we got a little bit of moisture overnight, which I was really hoping for. but it really didn't turn out to be anything. I barely got a drop out of the rain gauge, just enough to put a few sprinkles on the ground. So we're going to get back to tilling this morning and finish that up, and then we'll show you what we wanted to show you yesterday. Might be a little windy, so bear with us. We got the tilling done. You can see there's still some green in the row here, but those weeds are thoroughly chopped up and they're just going to wilt and die and become nutrients for the soil. And I wanted to show you how little weeds were actually in the row. We got a couple over here and barely any over here. And that's the mulch working, folks. We've got mulch down on these rows when we planted, right before we planted this year. And I tell you folks, mulch is the key to a pretty much weed-free garden, or a easy to take care of garden. You don't need all of the weed cloth and all that. It's just going to get in your way. It's going to fold up. It's going to start blowing around. It's going to be in your way when you're trying to amend your soil. You just don't need it. Mulch is all that you need. And we got a real good pile going out here right now that's going to be really good for next year. Now this mulch I'm going to leave down, and if you remember, we have drip hose in underneath this mulch. Right underneath the mulch on top of the dirt we put our drip hose. That's why we're not just tilling the whole garden. And I'm going to leave that in the ground. I'm going to leave this infrastructure in for the winter. It's not going to hurt anything. I may just plant tomatoes right back on these again next year. But if we want to move them, I'll move them in the spring after everything thaws and we can move things around. But you can see the garden looking pretty good. The few weeds that are in the row, I'll come back out with my hoe and do a little hoeing around. It'd probably take me 30 minutes tops to take care of those weeds in the row. And I haven't been out here for literally a month and a half. So you can see that we've been doing a pretty good job this summer getting rid of or knocking down our seed bank. And once winter hits, nothing's really going to continue to grow out here, and if it does, the ground will be frozen. We can't do much about it. But doing all this tilling is going to give us a jump getting ready in the spring, because these walk paths pretty much won't need to be touched, and we'll come through, we'll amend our soil, probably get some steer manure. I may or may not do that. I was thinking about doing it, but we got chicken manure in the mulch pile out there. So it's going to compost down over the winter, and it shouldn't be too hot once we put it in here. So before we plant, we'll come back in here and remulch this row. Now the mulch we did this year, the current year, it keeps the weeds down, but it will break down over the winter and those nutrients will leach down into the soil. So this year's mulch becomes next year's fertilizer. So we'll come through here next year with a new layer of mulch right on the row, and then we'll plant right down into that mulch after we give it a good watering, and our garden will be going gangbusters again. I'm going to get you out of the wind. We'll go in the greenhouse and we'll wrap this thing up. On a side note, our channel just hit 3,000 subscribers. We're pretty proud of that. Thank all of you for liking and subscribing our videos. It helps to get to more people. We enjoy helping people learn how to do stuff the old way. And I also apologize we haven't got the drone up yet because it's been a little windy since we got it. But we'll get her up and we'll get some good shots. So 35 degrees outside and 90 degrees in the greenhouse. Toasty warm in here. But if you're thinking about putting one of these up and growing stuff here in the greenhouse, overnight it gets just as cold in this greenhouse as it is outside because you don't have the sun providing the thermal heat in here. But if you have boy, cat never misses an opportunity to let you know he's here every time I video. But if it's frost hardy stuff, you can grow it in here. Like right now we have some onions and some garlic and a couple lick tubs in here. They're doing fine. You won't get as much of the frost here in the greenhouse, but it will get cold. So if you want to grow stuff in the winter in a non-insulated greenhouse like this, you're going to have a heater. That's not the video we're here for. I just wanted to come in here to get you guys out of the wind. So I'm going to go out and hoe those rows, and then that garden will be put to bed, and we won't have to worry it again until spring. But remember, folks, don't neglect your garden in the fall. Make sure you don't want to waste all of that work you've done over the summer taking down your seed bank. So every one of those weeds that sprouted here while I was at harvest is one less weed I have to worry about next year. So that's why we do it. Now, one thing I want you to remember when you're tilling, the tiller in the middle where the drive mechanism is doesn't till the middle. It only tills on the outer portion of the rototiller. So when you turn around and do a lap and overlap, you need to make sure your tiller section is covering where the middle of your last pass was. So you're not overlapping very far when you're tilling. You want to make sure you get that dug up too. Keep that in mind. Now, a 3-point tiller on the tractor doesn't have that problem because the drive on that is clear on the outside of the tiller, and the whole tiller section is tilling. So you don't have to worry about that on the big ones. Maybe they'll figure out an end drive for one of these smaller tillers one of these days. So the other thing about the tiller is we're going to be putting that to bed also. So I don't know if you can hear it running in the background. We're going to run every bit of gas out of that. Now some people will say just put some Sta-Bil in the gas, but talking with my small engine mechanic, he said that's good for a few months, but he says you don't want to overwinter with it. So we just run all the gas out of all of our equipment for the winter if we're not going to be using it at all. And that way we don't have them coming up on the carburetor. And if you remember our winterizing video last year, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you want to winterize your place, make sure all of your battery stuff that has starters, make sure you have those on battery maintainers so it keeps your batteries healthy as well. So till next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. We're going to be firing up the butcher shop here on the farm real soon because the temperatures are prime for hanging meat out in the barn. The daytime temps don't get above about 45 degrees, and that is perfect. So we're going to be doing some chickens, we're going to be doing a hog, and we're going to be doing a steer this year. So we'll bring you along for the ride on those. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy again. We love you guys. Come back and see us here on Mark Kelly Farm.